I ran into my billionaire ex-husband in the penthouse elevator, unaware his secret twins lived next door. They're mine, Gabriel whispered, the words barely audible as he stared at the twin boys disappearing down the hallway. His face had drained of color, eyes fixed on Nora with a mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Nora's silence was confirmation enough. She stood perfectly still, her chin lifted in that defiant gesture he remembered so well, watching as the truth rewrote his understanding of the past 4 years. You were pregnant when you left, he said, another piece falling into place. After the miscarriage. That was the first pregnancy, she replied quietly, her composed exterior finally cracking. 6 months later, I discovered I was pregnant again, with twins. And you didn't tell me. The accusation hung between them, heavy with 4 years of lost time. You made it very clear that children weren't part of your plan anymore, Nora countered, pain edging her voice. After we lost the baby, you said you couldn't go through that again, that your work needed to be your focus. That was grief talking, Gabriel said, running a hand through his hair. You should have told me, Nora. I had a right to know. And they had a right to a father who wanted them, she fired back. Not one who saw them as an inconvenience to his ambitions. Have you ever wondered what it would take to rebuild a bridge that's been completely burned? To face the consequences of words spoken in grief that altered the course of multiple lives. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how a chance elevator encounter revealed a secret that would force 2 people to confront the painful choices of their past. Hi, my beautiful sisters. Sometimes life puts us in impossible situations where every choice feels like a sacrifice. Today's story is for every woman who's had to make difficult decisions to protect her heart and her children. Remember that your strength isn't measured by how much pain you can endure alone, but by the courage it takes to open yourself to healing, even when it means facing the very person who broke you. Your journey matters, your choices are valid, and your heart deserves the chance to be whole again. If you've ever had a moment that changed the entire trajectory of your life in an instant, hit that like button right now. And stay with me until the end to discover how fate sometimes gives us second chances when we least expect them. The first time Gabriel Morgan stepped into the penthouse elevator of Archer Towers, he wasn't expecting to confront his past. He was simply returning to his newly acquired sanctuary after 18 hours of negotiations that had secured his company's most ambitious acquisition yet. His tie was loosened, suit jacket draped over one arm, the weight of a $30 billion empire momentarily heavy on his shoulders. The digital display showed the elevator descending from the 47th floor, his floor, and he checked his watch impatiently, mentally reviewing the points he needed to address in tomorrow's board meeting. When the doors slid open, revealing the woman he had once vowed to love forever, time seemed to fold in on itself. For years compressed into a single heartbeat as he stared into the face that had once been as familiar as his own. Nora, just her name, spoken with a mixture of disbelief and something deeper he couldn't quite name. Nora Winters stood perfectly still, as though she too had been caught in time's sudden compression. Her simple black dress and minimal jewelry were a stark contrast to the elaborate couture she'd favored during their marriage, but her eyes, those striking gray eyes that had once looked at him with such love, remained unchanged. Gabriel. Her voice was steady despite the visible shock on her face. I didn't know you were back in the city. The elevator doors began to close, and Gabriel's hand shot out to stop them. I moved in last month. Penthouse A. His eyes studied her with unsettling intensity. You live here. Penthouse C, she replied, stepping into the elevator despite visible reluctance. For about a year now. The doors closed, sealing them into the small space that suddenly felt airless. Gabriel pressed the button for the 47th floor, though it was already illuminated. 47 floors. The longest elevator ride of his life. You look well, he offered, his gaze still taking in the changes 4 years had wrought. Her hair was shorter now, falling just below her shoulders instead of the waist-length curtain he remembered. There was a new confidence in her posture, a self-possession that hadn't been there before. So do you, she replied, her tone carefully neutral. Success agrees with you, apparently. He couldn't miss the edge in her voice. The financial press had been relentless in documenting his meteoric rise after their divorce. The bold acquisitions, the ruthless strategy, the transformation of his modest investment firm into Morgan Global, now one of the most powerful financial entities in the world. "It keeps me busy," he said, immediately regretting the banality of the response. Once, they had shared everything: dreams, fears, the exhilarating uncertainty of building a life together. Now they were exchanging pleasantries like strangers. The elevator climbed with excruciating slowness, each floor marked by a soft chime that punctuated the heavy silence between them. Gabriel kept his eyes fixed on her profile, searching for clues to the life she'd built without him. "I read about your foundation," he said finally. "The work you're doing with children's literacy. It's impressive." Something flickered across her expression. Surprise, perhaps, that he had followed her career. "It's fulfilling," she acknowledged. "After everything, I needed purpose." The unspoken hung between them. After the divorce, after the miscarriage that had shattered their marriage, after he had buried himself in work rather than grief, making himself unreachable when she needed him most. "Nora, don't," she interrupted, her voice suddenly tight. "We're just neighbors now, Gabriel. That's all." The elevator chimed again, announcing their arrival at the 47th floor. As the doors slid open, Nora moved to step out, but Gabriel's voice stopped her. "Have dinner with me." She turned back, disbelief evident in her expression. "Excuse me? Dinner?" he repeated, something urgent in his tone. "There are things I should have said 4 years ago, things I need to say now." Nora studied him. This man who had once been her entire world, now a stranger wearing a familiar face. The wariness in her eyes spoke volumes about the wounds that still hadn't healed. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said finally. "Just one dinner," Gabriel pressed. "Tomorrow night. Neutral territory, that Italian place on Madison you used to love. Salvatore's." The mention of their old favorite restaurant hit its mark. He saw the flicker of memory in her eyes. For a moment he thought she might refuse outright, but instead, she hesitated. "Why now, Gabriel? After 4 years of silence?" Something shifted in his expression, a brief glimpse of vulnerability that he would have hidden from anyone else. Because some mistakes can't be fixed with money or power. Some require facing the person you wronged and accepting whatever consequences come. Before she could respond, a commotion from down the hallway caught their attention. 2 small figures in matching pajamas raced toward the elevator, their excited voices carrying through the corridor. "Mommy, Ms. Parker said we could have one more story if you read it." Gabriel froze, his eyes fixed on the children. Twin boys, perhaps 3 years old, with dark curls and familiar gray eyes. Then at Nora, whose expression had transformed into one of protective alarm. "Ethan Alexander, go back to the apartment with Miss Parker," Nora said quickly, stepping out of the elevator to intercept the children. "I'll be there in a moment." But the boys had already noticed Gabriel, their curious gazes fixed on him with the unfiltered interest of childhood. "Who are you?" one of them asked boldly. "An old friend of your mother's," Gabriel replied automatically, his mind racing as he calculated timelines with growing disbelief. The twins appeared to be about 3 years old, which meant, "Do you live in our building?" the other twin asked, gray eyes, Nora's eyes, wide with curiosity. "Yes," Gabriel managed, his gaze moving from the children to Nora, whose expression had settled into grim resignation. "I just moved in." A woman in her 50s appeared in the hallway, apologizing as she approached. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Winters. They insisted on saying good night again." "It's fine, Ms. Parker," Nora assured her, though her eyes never left Gabriel's face. "Please take them back to the apartment. I'll be there for story time in 5 minutes." As the nanny led the protesting children away, silence fell between the former couple once more. Gabriel's mind raced, calculating dates and possibilities with the same precision he applied to financial analyses. "They're 3, he said, the statement hanging between them like a challenge. 3.5, Nora corrected, her chin lifting slightly in a gesture of defiance he remembered well. We've been divorced for 4 years, and separated for nearly 5. Her voice was steady, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands had curled into loose fists at her sides. The implications crashed over him in waves. The timing of their separation, her abrupt withdrawal from their divorce proceedings, her disappearance from New York social circles for nearly a year afterward. Details that had seemed insignificant then now rearranged themselves into a devastating new picture. "They're mine," he said, the words barely audible. Not a question, but a realization that altered everything. Nora's silence was confirmation enough. She stood perfectly still, watching as the truth rewrote his understanding of the past 4 years. "You were pregnant when you left." Another piece falling into place. "The miscarriage was the first pregnancy," she said quietly. "6 months later, I discovered I was pregnant again, with twins. And you didn't tell me." The accusation hung between them, heavy with 4 years of lost time. "You made it very clear that children weren't part of your plan anymore," Nora replied, an edge of old pain in her voice. "After we lost the baby, you said you couldn't go through that again, that your work needed to be your focus." "That was grief talking," Gabriel said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "You should have told me, Nora. I had a right to know. And they had a right to a father who wanted them," she countered, her composure finally cracking. "Not one who saw them as an inconvenience to his ambitions." The elevator doors began to close, and Gabriel moved forward automatically to stop them. But Nora shook her head. "Go home, Gabriel. This isn't a conversation for hallways." "When then?" he demanded, a desperation in his voice that would have shocked his business associates. "When do we have this conversation?" Nora hesitated, conflict evident in her expression. "Penthouse B," she said finally. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m. The apartment between ours is empty, neutral territory. We can talk there." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her straight back and measured steps betraying none of the emotion he knew must be churning beneath her composed exterior. As the elevator doors closed, Gabriel leaned against the wall, his mind reeling with revelations that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew about the past 4 years. Sons. He had sons. Children who shared his blood but not his name, who had been living just one wall away from him for the past month without his knowledge. If you believe some secrets are too big to keep, even with the best intentions, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales for more stories that explore life's complicated truths. In his apartment, Gabriel moved through the vast space that had never felt like home, pouring himself a scotch with unsteady hands. He approached the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the glittering Manhattan skyline that had once represented everything he wanted. Now, for the first time since their divorce, he allowed himself to acknowledge the emptiness that success had never filled. His phone buzzed with messages from his executive team, questions about tomorrow's board meeting, updates on the acquisition, congratulations on another corporate victory. For once, he ignored them all. His focus narrowed to a single thought that eclipsed every other concern. "Penthouse B," he murmured to himself, the invitation or reckoning, echoing in his mind as he stared into the night. Tomorrow. What he couldn't know, as he stood alone with his reflection in the darkened glass, was that in Penthouse C, Nora Winters sat on the edge of her son's beds, watching them sleep with fierce protectiveness, wondering if she had made the right choice 4 years ago, and if she was making the right choice now by finally opening the door to truths that could no longer remain hidden. To understand how Gabriel and Nora had reached this moment of reckoning, we need to go back to the beginning, to the day 7 years earlier when a brilliant but reserved art curator first caught the attention of an ambitious young investment banker. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual gala had been in full swing, the elite of New York society draped in designer finery, networking and posturing beneath priceless artwork. Gabriel Morgan, then just 30 and already making waves in financial circles, had attended only at his mentor's insistence. Art wasn't his passion. Building wealth was. "You're scowling again," his mentor had chided, steering him toward the Renaissance exhibition. "At least pretend to appreciate culture. These are potential clients, Gabriel, not obstacles to be overcome." That's when he saw her, Nora Winters, assistant curator, explaining the symbolism in a lesser-known Botticelli to an elderly couple. Her passion was evident in every gesture, every word. Her face illuminated with genuine enthusiasm rather than the practiced social smiles surrounding them. "Who is that?" Gabriel had asked, interrupting his mentor's introduction to a hedge fund manager. "The curator? Nora Winters. Brilliant mind, they say." "Why?" Gabriel hadn't answered, already moving toward her as though pulled by an invisible force. Later, Nora would tease him about that moment. How he'd stood awkwardly waiting for her to finish. How he'd asked her about the painting despite having no real interest in art. How transparent his intentions had been. "I wasn't interested in the painting," he'd admitted on their third date. "I was interested in the way you looked when you talked about it. Like you'd discovered something magical that the rest of the world had missed." Their courtship had been swift and intense. Two people from different worlds finding unexpected connection. Nora's artistic sensibility balanced Gabriel's analytical mind. His ambition complemented her thoughtfulness. Within a year, they were married in a small ceremony at the museum where they'd met, surrounded by the art that had brought them together. The first 2 years had been blissful, a perfect balance of career advancement and personal joy. Gabriel's investment firm grew steadily, while Nora rose to associate curator, specializing in Renaissance art. They traveled, entertained, built a life rich with both culture and comfort. When Nora discovered she was pregnant in their 3rd year of marriage, it seemed the natural next chapter in their perfect story. The miscarriage came without warning in her 2nd trimester. One day they were discussing nursery colors. The next, they were in a sterile hospital room. The doctor's voice gentle but final as he explained there was nothing that could have been done. "These things happen," the doctor had said. "Often there's no clear reason." But Gabriel needed reasons. Needed something to fix, to solve, to overcome. When no explanation was forthcoming, his grief transformed into a desperate drive to control what he could. His work, his success, his empire in the making. "We can try again," Nora had suggested, 3 months after their loss, reaching for him across the emotional chasm that had formed between them. "When we're ready." "I can't," Gabriel had replied, not meeting her eyes. "I can't go through that again. Maybe we should focus on our careers for now. Children can come later." But later never came. Instead, Gabriel worked longer hours, took bigger risks, pushed harder for success. Nora retreated into her work as well, but with a different purpose, seeking healing through beauty and art rather than escape through ambition. 6 months after the miscarriage, during a rare dinner together at home, Nora had tried once more to bridge the growing distance. "We need to talk about what happened," she'd said quietly. "About the baby. About us." "There's nothing to talk about," Gabriel had responded, already checking his phone for emails. "It happened. It's over. We move forward." "But we're not moving forward together," Nora had persisted. "We're moving in completely different directions." "What do you want from me, Nora?" His frustration had finally boiled over. "To sit around talking about feelings? To dwell on something we can't change? I'm building something important here. Something that will last. And our marriage isn't important? Isn't something that should last?" The silence that followed her question had been answer enough. 2 weeks later, Nora moved out, leaving behind a note that Gabriel had read so many times he'd memorized every word. "I can't compete with your ambition, and I won't try anymore. Perhaps someday you'll realize that success without someone to share it with is just achievement, not happiness. I hope you find what you're looking for. I need to find what I've lost." The divorce had been quick and surprisingly amicable on the surface. Gabriel, already retreating into the persona of the ruthless businessman he would become, had been generous with the settlement. Nora, for reasons he couldn't understand at the time, had seemed almost eager to finalize everything, refusing to fight over assets or details. Now, staring at the Manhattan skyline from his penthouse, Gabriel understood her haste with painful clarity. She had been pregnant, with his children, and she had chosen to face the journey alone rather than with a husband who had made it clear that children weren't part of his plan. The realization brought him to his knees, literally, as he sank to the floor, scotch forgotten, the full weight of what he had lost, what he had thrown away, finally crashing down on him. "I have sons," he whispered to the empty room. "I have sons." In Penthouse C, Nora gently closed the twins' bedroom door, her mind still reeling from the encounter with Gabriel. She had known this day might come when she signed the lease at Archer Towers, had even prepared for it in theory. The building was one of the few in Manhattan with the security and amenities she wanted for the boys, and she had refused to let Gabriel's ownership of a penthouse there deter her. New York was a big city, after all, and their social circles no longer overlapped. The chances of running into him had seemed minimal. Yet here they were, neighbors with only an empty apartment between them and 4 years of secrets about to unravel. "You look troubled," Miss Parker observed as Nora entered the kitchen. The older woman had been with them since the twins were born, more family now than employee. Was that him? Their father? Nora nodded, pouring herself a glass of wine with slightly trembling hands. "In the elevator. He's living in Penthouse A." "Oh my!" Miss Parker sat down heavily at the kitchen island. "And the boys ran out before you could. Did he realize?" "Yes." Nora took a long sip of wine. "He knows they're his. We're meeting tomorrow to talk." "After all this time?" Miss Parker shook her head. "Are you going to tell the boys?" "Not yet." Nora's protective instincts flared. "Not until I know what he wants, what his intentions are." "And what do you want?" Miss Parker asked gently, her eyes kind but probing. "After all this time, what do you hope will come from this?" Nora stared into her wine glass, considering the question. What did she want? She had built a life without Gabriel, had raised their sons alone, had found purpose and even happiness in the path she'd chosen. Yet seeing him again had awakened something she thought long buried. Not just the old pain, but the memory of what had drawn them together in the first place. "I want what's best for Ethan and Alexander," she said finally. "Beyond that, I don't know." But as she lay awake that night, memories flooding back with merciless clarity, Nora admitted to herself that there was more to it than that. Part of her, a part she had ruthlessly suppressed for 4 years, wanted Gabriel to fight for them, to prove that the man she had fallen in love with still existed somewhere beneath the ambitious tycoon he had become, to show that losing their first child had broken him as deeply as it had broken her, just in different ways. Another part, hardened by years of solo parenting and protective of the family unit she'd created, feared exactly that. The next evening arrived with inevitable swiftness. Gabriel stood outside Penthouse B at precisely 8 p.m., a bottle of wine in one hand, a folder of documents in the other. He had spent the day in a fog, going through the motions of running his empire while his mind remained fixed on the evening ahead. His executive team had noticed his distraction but attributed it to the pressure of the recent acquisition. None would have guessed that Gabriel Morgan, notorious for his laser focus and emotional detachment, was completely undone by the discovery of his fatherhood. He had considered bringing toys for the twins but decided against it. This meeting was with Nora, to understand what had happened and why. Meeting his sons, truly meeting them, not as a stranger in a hallway but as their father, would come later if Nora allowed it. If he deserved it. The door opened before he could knock, revealing Nora in simple black pants and a cream sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. The apartment behind her was empty except for 2 chairs and a small table she must have brought over for this meeting. "You came," she said, as though she had half expected him not to. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Gabriel stepped inside, noting the neutral territory she had created. No personal touches, no advantages to either side. "I wasn't sure," Nora admitted, closing the door. "The Gabriel I knew at the end would have sent his lawyer." The observation stung with its accuracy. "I'm not that man anymore," he said quietly. "At least I'm trying not to be." Nora accepted the wine but set aside the folder without looking at it. "What's that?" "Financial information. Trust funds I've set up for the boys. Documentation of assets I want to transfer to them." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how transactional this sounded. "I'm not trying to buy my way in, Nora. I just want them provided for." "They are provided for," she replied, her voice cooling. I've made sure of that. I know you have. That's not what I meant. Gabriel took a deep breath, forcing himself to slow down. Can we sit? Please. They settled into the chairs, the small table between them like a demilitarized zone. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of their shared history and separate journeys filling the space between them. Tell me about them, Gabriel said finally. Ethan and Alexander. Please. Something in his voice, the genuine plea beneath the request, seemed to reach Nora. Her expression softened slightly. Ethan is older by 7 minutes and never lets his brother forget it, she began, a small smile touching her lips. He's thoughtful, observant, always planning his next move. Alexander is more impulsive, more openly affectionate. He dives into everything headfirst. Literally, sometimes, which explains the scar on his chin. Gabriel listened with rapt attention as Nora continued, painting a picture of his son's personalities, their likes and dislikes, their daily routines and milestone moments. With each detail, the reality of what he had missed settled deeper into his consciousness. First steps, first words, first days of preschool. 1,000 moments, gone forever. They're extraordinary, he said when she finally paused. They sound like perfect combinations of us. They are. Nora's guard lowered further as she spoke of their children. Ethan has your analytical mind and my love of beauty. Alexander has my impulsiveness but your determination. They're both stubborn as mules, which is definitely from both of us. A chuckle escaped Gabriel at this observation, surprising them both with its warmth. For a brief moment, they shared a genuine smile, connected by the miracle they had created together, however complicated the circumstances. But the moment passed, reality reasserting itself as Nora's expression grew serious again. Why didn't you tell me? Gabriel asked, the question that had burned in him since yesterday finally emerging. Even if you thought I didn't want children then, why keep it from me for 4 years? Nora was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was measured, as though she had rehearsed this explanation many times. When I discovered I was pregnant, we had been separated for 3 months. The divorce was nearly final. You were already being hailed as the next financial wunderkind, taking bigger risks, working impossible hours. She met his gaze directly. And the last real conversation we had about children, you said you couldn't go through that again. That your work needed to be your focus. I was grieving, Gabriel protested. We both were. Yes, but we grieved differently. I wanted to talk about it, to process it together. You shut down, threw yourself into work, shut me out completely. Nora's voice remained calm, but her eyes reflected old pain. When I found out about the twins, I had a choice to make. I could tell you and watch you struggle between the family you said you didn't want and the career that was consuming you, or I could let you go, let you have the life you seemed to be choosing. That wasn't your choice to make alone, Gabriel said, anger finally edging into his voice. They're my sons too. And where were you when I was on bed rest for the last 2 months of a high-risk pregnancy? Nora countered, her own anger surfacing. Where were you during the 36-hour labor? Or the colic that kept them crying for 3 months straight? Or when Ethan had pneumonia at 18 months and I didn't sleep for a week? The questions hit Gabriel like physical blows, each one highlighting his absence, his ignorance of his own children's lives. I would have been there if I had known, he said, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. I would have been there, Nora. Would you? She studied him with those perceptive gray eyes. The Gabriel I left was drowning in his own ambition, using work to avoid facing his grief. Would that man really have set everything aside to change diapers and walk screaming babies at 3 a.m.? The question hung between them, uncomfortable in its honesty. Gabriel wanted to protest, to insist he would have risen to the occasion. But the truth was more complex. The man he had been 4 years ago had been broken in ways he hadn't recognized, using success as a shield against vulnerability, against the possibility of further loss. I don't know, he admitted finally, the honesty costing him dearly. I'd like to think I would have, but I don't know. I was Lost after we lost the baby. After I lost you. The raw confession seemed to surprise Nora. She had expected defensiveness, perhaps even legal threats, but not this vulnerability. So was I, she said softly. But I found my way back through them. They healed me in ways I never expected. Gabriel nodded, understanding dawning. And you were protecting them. From the man I was becoming. Yes. The simple acknowledgement hung between them. But also from the pain of having a father with one foot always out the door, always checking his phone, always thinking about the next deal instead of the moment right in front of him. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after it was broken? Share your experience in the comments below. The truth of her words struck deep. Gabriel had seen his own father operate exactly that way. Physically present but mentally absent, measuring his love in provisions rather than presence. He had sworn he would never be that kind of father, yet without even knowing it, he had been heading down the same path. I understand why you did it, he said finally. I don't agree with it, but I understand. That's more than I expected, Nora admitted. I thought you'd be furious, threatening lawsuits, demanding custody arrangements. Is that what you want me to do? Gabriel asked, studying her reaction carefully. No, Nora shook her head firmly. That would only hurt the boys. They need stability, not a legal battle. Then what do you want, Nora? Where do we go from here? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She had been prepared for anger, for demands, for the hard-charging businessman to assert his rights. This more thoughtful approach left her momentarily at a loss. I don't know, she said honestly. I never planned for this moment. Never thought about what would happen if you found out. Let me meet them, Gabriel said, leaning forward. Properly, not as your old friend from the hallway. Let me get to know them slowly on whatever terms you think are best. Nora hesitated, protective instincts warring with the knowledge that her sons deserved to know their father. The real man, not just the story she might tell them someday. And what happens when they become inconvenient? She asked, the fear that had kept her silent for years finally surfacing. When a board meeting conflicts with a soccer game. When a merger is more pressing than a school play. Gabriel flinched at the questions, recognizing the legitimate fear behind them. I deserve that, he acknowledged. But I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be different. That I can be better. He leaned forward, his expression more earnest than she had seen it in years. I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, Nora. I've built the empire, made the billions, become the person everyone said I could be. And it's hollow, empty. Yesterday, when I saw those boys, our boys, I felt more in that single moment than I have in 4 years of closing deals. Nora studied him, searching for signs of the old Gabriel beneath the polished exterior of the tycoon. Words are easy, she said finally. Showing up day after day is hard. Then let me show up, he replied simply. Give me the chance to prove it with actions, not just words. After a long moment, Nora nodded slowly. We'll start small. Sunday brunch at my place. You'll come as my friend, and we'll see how the boys respond to you. No revelations yet, no pressure. Just getting to know each other. Relief washed over Gabriel's face. Thank you, he said, the words inadequate for the gratitude he felt. I won't let you down. I won't let them down. I hope not, Nora replied, her voice softening slightly. Because they're extraordinary, Gabriel. And they deserve nothing less than extraordinary from both of us. As they finalized the details for Sunday, a tentative peace settled between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. When they parted at the door, Gabriel resisted the urge to embrace her, settling instead for a gentle touch on her arm. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I never stopped thinking about you. Even at my worst, most driven moments, there was always a space in my life that only you had ever filled. Nora's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of the truth in his words. Good night, Gabriel, she said softly before turning away. The next 2 days passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation for Gabriel. He canceled a trip to Tokyo, rescheduled meetings, and spent hours researching child development for 3-year-olds. His executive team was baffled by his sudden unavailability, but he offered no explanations. Some things were private, sacred even, and his newfound fatherhood felt too precious, too fragile to expose to the corporate world just yet. Sunday morning arrived with Gabriel standing outside Nora's door at precisely 10:55 a.m., 5 minutes early for their agreed meeting time. He carried a small bag containing carefully selected gifts. Picture books about adventure and exploration, nothing extravagant but thoughtfully chosen based on what Nora had shared about the twins' interests. When she opened the door, the sounds and smells of a family home washed over him. Pancakes cooking, children's laughter, toys scattered across an otherwise elegant living room. It was so different from his sterile penthouse that for a moment, Gabriel felt like he had stepped into another dimension. "You came," Nora said, echoing her words from their meeting in Penthouse B, but this time with a hint of approval rather than surprise. "I said I would," Gabriel replied simply, handing her the bag. "Just books. Nothing excessive." Nora's lips curved in a small smile as she glanced inside. "The Ethan ones are perfect, and Alexander will love the dinosaur one." She stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. They're in the kitchen, helping Ms. Parker with the pancakes, which means they're probably covered in flour by now. Gabriel followed her through the apartment, taking in the details of his son's home. Family photos on the walls, artwork clearly created by small hands proudly displayed. A balance of sophistication and warmth that was quintessentially Nora. When they reached the kitchen, he paused in the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed by the scene before him. The twins stood on step stools at the counter, their dark curls dusted with flour, faces intent with concentration as they helped Miss Parker pour batter onto a griddle. They were dressed in matching blue pajamas with different colored slippers. Green for one, red for the other, the only immediate way to tell them apart. "Boys," Nora called softly. "Remember my friend from the elevator? He's joining us for brunch today." 2 identical faces turned toward him, curious and unguarded in the way only children can be. Gabriel felt his heart constrict with a love so sudden and powerful it nearly took his breath away. These were his sons, his children, part of him and Nora, living and breathing in the world. "Hello," he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm Gabriel." "I'm Ethan," said the boy with green slippers, studying Gabriel with thoughtful eyes that mirrored his own. "That's Alexander. We're making pancakes." "I can see that," Gabriel replied, moving closer. "They look delicious. Do you like blueberries in yours?" Alexander asked, more immediately friendly than his brother. "Mommy says they're brain food, but I think they're just yummy." "I do like blueberries," Gabriel confirmed, catching Nora's eye over the boys' heads, silently thanking her for this moment. "And I think they can be both brain food and yummy." "That's what I said," Alexander exclaimed, as though Gabriel had just confirmed a long-disputed fact. "See, Ethan? Gabriel agrees with me." The easy use of his name, the immediate acceptance of his presence. It was more than Gabriel had dared hope for. Throughout brunch, he followed Nora's lead, answering the twins' endless questions, listening to their stories, discovering the unique personalities that made them individuals despite their identical appearance. Ethan was indeed the more reserved of the two, watching Gabriel carefully before engaging, asking thoughtful questions about where Gabriel lived and what he did. Alexander was all enthusiasm, showing Gabriel his favorite toys, explaining the complex rules of games he had invented, demanding to know if Gabriel could swim because the building had a pool and maybe they could all go swimming sometime. "You're good with them," Nora observed quietly as the boys disappeared into their room to retrieve a drawing they wanted to show Gabriel. "Better than I expected." "They make it easy," Gabriel replied honestly. "They're amazing, Nora. You've done an incredible job." A shadow crossed her face. "I've done my best, but there have been moments when they needed something I couldn't give them." "What do you mean?" Nora hesitated, then continued in a low voice. "Last Father's Day at preschool, they were making cards and Ethan asked why they didn't have a daddy to give one to. I told them that some families have a mommy and daddy, some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, some just have one parent. that all families are different but special. She met his gaze directly. He accepted it, but I saw the look in his eyes. The question that wasn't fully answered. The revelation hit Gabriel hard. While he had been oblivious, building his empire, his sons had been wondering about him, feeling his absence without even knowing who he was. "I want to be in their lives, Nora," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not just occasionally, really in their lives. Whatever that looks like. However, we need to make it work." Before she could respond, the twins returned, proudly displaying drawings of what appeared to be a family of dinosaurs. The conversation shifted back to safer territory, but something had changed between the former spouses, a tentative bridge forming over the chasm of their past. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Gabriel found himself increasingly reluctant to leave. Every new discovery about his sons, Ethan's meticulous attention to detail when building with blocks, Alexander's infectious laugh, the way they communicated with each other in half-sentences and shared glances, felt precious, to be treasured and remembered. When it was finally time to go, both boys surprised him with hugs, Alexander's enthusiastic and tight, Ethan's more reserved but equally genuine. "Will you come back?" Alexander asked directly, looking up at Gabriel with Nora's gray eyes. "If your mom says it's okay," Gabriel replied, glancing at Nora for confirmation. "Gabriel lives right here in our building," Nora explained to the twins. "In Penthouse A. So I think we'll be seeing more of him. You can come to our birthday party," Alexander exclaimed. "It's in 2 weeks and we're having a magician and a cake with both chocolate and vanilla because I like chocolate but Ethan likes vanilla." "That sounds wonderful," Gabriel said, his throat tight with emotion. "I'd be honored to come to your birthday party." As he prepared to leave, Nora walked him to the door, the twins distracted by a new game with Miss Parker. "Thank you," Gabriel said quietly, "for today." "For them." Nora nodded, her expression thoughtful. "They liked you," she observed, "especially Alexander, but even Ethan warmed up, which isn't always easy with new people." "When should we tell them?" Gabriel asked, the question that had been on his mind throughout the morning. "That I'm their father?" "Not yet," Nora replied firmly. "Let them get to know you first. Let them trust you. Then we'll find the right moment, the right words." She hesitated, then added, "They need to know they can count on you before they know who you really are to them." Gabriel understood the test implicit in her words. He would need to prove himself not just today but consistently, reliably, before earning the right to be acknowledged as their father. "I understand," he said, "and I agree. They deserve that certainty." As he walked back to his own penthouse, Gabriel felt as though he was seeing the world through new eyes. The emptiness that had haunted his success, the hollow victory of his achievements, all of it now made sense. He had been building an empire for children he didn't know existed, creating a legacy without the most important part, the people to share it with. In his apartment, Gabriel moved with newfound purpose. He called his assistant, rearranging his schedule for the coming weeks to ensure he would be available for the twins' birthday party and regular visits. Next, he contacted his lawyer, not to pursue custody rights as Nora had feared, but to update his will and establish trusts for Ethan and Alexander that would provide for them regardless of his relationship with their mother. The days that followed took on a new rhythm. Gabriel still ran his company with the same precision and vision that had made him a billionaire, but his priorities had shifted. Meetings ended on time rather than running late. Weekends became sacred, and most evenings found him in Penthouse C, reading bedtime stories, building elaborate block towers, or simply watching his sons play with a sense of wonder that his executive team would never have recognized in their hard-driving CEO. Nora observed these changes with cautious optimism. She had expected Gabriel's interest to wane as the novelty wore off, for work emergencies to pull him away, for the pattern that had destroyed their marriage to reassert itself. Instead, she watched as he consistently chose their sons over business demands, rescheduling international calls to attend preschool events, showing up when he said he would, fully present in a way he had never been during their marriage. "He's different with them than he was with me," she confided to Ms. Parker one evening after Gabriel had left. More patient, more attentive. People change, the older woman replied wisely. Sometimes they need the right motivation. The twins' birthday arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Gabriel had offered to host the celebration at an exclusive children's entertainment venue, but Nora had gently declined, preferring the more intimate setting of their home with just a few friends from preschool. To her surprise, Gabriel had accepted this decision without argument, arriving early to help with decorations and staying late to clean up after the last guest departed. As they collapsed onto the sofa, surrounded by the aftermath of a successful party, discarded wrapping paper, new toys scattered across the floor, the remains of a cake that had indeed been half chocolate, half vanilla, Nora found herself studying Gabriel with new eyes. "You've surprised me," she admitted, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "These past 2 weeks. I didn't think you'd be so present," Gabriel suggested when she trailed off. "Involved? Not a complete disaster as a father." A small smile touched Nora's lips. "All of the above. The Gabriel I knew couldn't sit through a 2-hour dinner without checking his phone. Today you spent 6 hours with sugar-fueled preschoolers and never once looked distracted." "I meant what I said, Nora. They're more important than anything else in my life." He turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about what you said, about them needing to know they can count on me. I think it's time to tell them. If you agree." Nora was quiet for a long moment, weighing the decision carefully. The boys had indeed grown attached to Gabriel, asking for him when he wasn't there, including him in their games and conversations with the easy acceptance of childhood. Ethan, initially more reserved, now sought Gabriel's opinion on his drawings and building projects. Alexander had taken to calling him "my Gabriel" when talking to friends, a possessiveness that hinted at a deeper need being fulfilled. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do it together carefully, and we make it clear that nothing changes in their daily routine. They still live here with me. You're still next door. We're not." She hesitated. "Not getting back together," Gabriel finished for her, his expression unreadable. "I understand." The next morning, they gathered the twins in the living room, sitting them on the sofa between them. Gabriel felt his heart racing with a nervousness no business negotiation had ever inspired. "We have something important to tell you," Nora began gently. "Something about Gabriel and about our family." The twins looked between them with curious expressions, sensing the significance of the moment despite their young age. "You know how we've talked about different kinds of families?" Nora continued. "And how you've asked about your daddy before?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "You said he had to be away." The simple statement, the acceptance in his son's voice, pierced Gabriel's heart. What stories had Nora told to explain his absence? What gentle fictions to protect them from the harder truth? "That's right," Nora said, her voice steady despite the emotion Gabriel could see in her eyes. "But sometimes people who have been away can come back. Sometimes they find their way home." She took a deep breath. "Gabriel is your daddy." The words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Alexander's eyes widened immediately, while Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration as he processed this revelation. "You're our daddy?" Alexander asked directly, looking up at Gabriel with newfound wonder. "Yes," Gabriel confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "I am." "But you've been here all the time," Ethan observed, his analytical mind working through the puzzle. "Right next door." "I didn't know," Gabriel explained, choosing honesty in terms they might understand. "I was away for a long time, and I didn't know about you. When I saw you that night by the elevator, that was the first time I learned I had 2 amazing sons." "Why didn't you know?" Alexander asked, the directness of childhood cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Gabriel and Nora exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them about how much to share. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Nora said carefully. "We don't always talk to each other the way we should. I didn't tell your daddy about you when you were babies, and that was my mistake. And I wasn't ready to be a good daddy then," Gabriel added, taking responsibility alongside her. "I was too busy with work, not understanding what was really important. That was my mistake. The twins considered this processing in their different ways. Alexander, true to his impulsive nature, was the first to respond, throwing his arms around Gabriel's neck. "But you're here now," he declared, as though that settled everything. "You're our daddy now." Ethan was more measured, studying Gabriel with those thoughtful eyes that reflected his own. "Are you going to stay?" he asked, the question revealing a wisdom beyond his years. "Or go away again?" "I'm staying," Gabriel promised, holding his son's gaze with equal seriousness. "I live right next door, and I will always be your daddy, no matter what." Slowly, Ethan moved closer, allowing Gabriel to put an arm around him. The four of them sat together on the sofa, not a conventional family perhaps, but connected by bonds that transcended the complications of their past. In the months that followed, Gabriel and Nora continued their careful dance of co-parenting, each day bringing them closer not just as parents, but as individuals rediscovering each other. The purchase of Penthouse had been finalized, and architects were drawing up plans to create a unique family space, a bridge between their separate lives that reflected their growing connection. One evening in early spring, nearly a year after their elevator encounter, Gabriel invited Nora to dinner at Salvatore's, the Italian restaurant he had suggested during their first reunion, the place that had once been their favorite during happier times. "The boys are with Miss Parker for the evening," he explained when she hesitated. "Just dinner, Nora. No pressure." She accepted, curious about this gesture that felt different from their usual family-centered interactions. When she arrived at the restaurant, she found Gabriel waiting at their old corner table, the one with the view of the small courtyard garden now blooming with early spring flowers. "You remembered our table," she observed, settling across from him. "I remember everything about us," Gabriel replied simply. "The good and the bad." The evening unfolded with surprising ease, conversation flowing between them as it hadn't in years. They spoke of the twins, of course, but also of their own journeys. Gabriel's realization that his drive for success had been partly fueled by a need to prove himself worthy of the family he'd lost. Nora's discovery that raising their sons alone had given her a strength she never knew she possessed. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night at the Met Gala?" Gabriel asked as they shared tiramisu, another tradition from their dating days. "When I asked why you loved art so much?" Nora smiled, the memory surfacing easily. "I said that great art isn't about perfection. It's about truth, about capturing the beauty in our flaws and contradictions." "I didn't understand then," Gabriel admitted. "I was still chasing perfection in everything. My career, our marriage, our life together. When we lost the baby, when things fell apart, I couldn't accept that some pain can't be fixed or controlled. It can only be lived through. And now," Nora asked softly, "now I understand that the most beautiful things are often imperfect." His eyes held hers across the table. "Like us. Like our journey." As they walked back to Archer Towers through the mild spring evening, Gabriel guided them toward Central Park rather than directly home. Nora followed, sensing something significant in his demeanor. "There's something I want to show you," he explained as they entered the park, following a path that seemed vaguely familiar to Nora. When they reached the Bethesda fountain, illuminated beautifully against the night sky, recognition dawned. This was where Gabriel had proposed to her 7 years earlier, on another spring night under a full moon much like tonight's. "Gabriel," she began, uncertainty in her voice. "Just listen," he said gently. "Please." He took both her hands in his expression more open, more vulnerable than she had ever seen it during their marriage. "A year ago, I thought I had everything I wanted," he began. "Success, wealth, power. All the things I'd been chasing since we lost each other. Then I stepped into that elevator, and in an instant, everything I thought I knew was turned upside down." Nora remained silent, her heart beating rapidly as she recognized the significance of this moment, of this place. "Finding out about Ethan and Alexander changed me," Gabriel continued, "but not in the way you might think. It wasn't just becoming a father that transformed me. It was seeing you again, seeing the woman you'd become without me. Stronger, more confident, an incredible mother and a force in your own right. He took a deep breath, his hands tightening slightly around hers. I fell in love with you all over again, Nora. Not the memory of who you were, but the reality of who you are now. The woman who raised our sons alone, who built a meaningful life, who had the courage to give me a second chance to be their father, even after everything that happened between us. Tears gathered in Nora's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at his words. These past months, watching you with the boys, seeing your kindness and your strength, I've realized something I was too blind to see before, Gabriel continued. That success means nothing without someone to share it with. That the empire I built was always meant for us. For our family, even when I didn't know they existed. Slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands, the gesture echoing their past but somehow entirely new. I'm not asking you to go back to what we were, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. That chapter is closed. I'm asking if you'll consider writing a new one with me. A better one where we face whatever comes together, where we put our family first, where we build something stronger because of what we've lost and found again. From his pocket, he withdrew a ring. Not the ostentatious diamond he had given her in their youth, but a simple band of intertwined gold and platinum, symbolic of separate paths now joining. Nora Winters, mother of my children, keeper of my heart, will you marry me? Again, but differently this time. Better this time. Nora looked down at this man who had once broken her heart, who had found his way back to her through their children, who had proven over months of consistent presence and genuine change that second chances were sometimes worth the risk. How do I know you won't retreat into work when things get hard again? She asked, needing certainty before she could answer. How can I be sure? Because I've learned what matters, Gabriel replied without hesitation. Because I've lived without you and with you, and there's no comparison. Because every day for the past year, I've chosen our family over everything else, and it's the easiest choice I've ever made. Nora thought of the changes she had witnessed, not just promises but consistent actions. The way he had integrated himself into their lives without trying to control them. The respect he had shown for the boundaries she set. The genuine joy he found in fatherhood. The man kneeling before her was both the Gabriel she had first loved and someone entirely new. Tempered by loss, humbled by second chances, committed in a way he had never been before. Yes, she said finally, her voice clear despite her tears. Yes, I'll marry you again. As Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to embrace her, Nora felt the pieces of her life shifting into a new configuration. Not erasing the past but building upon it, creating something stronger from the foundation of all they had experienced apart and together. They shared the news with the twins the next morning over breakfast, explaining in simple terms that their mommy and daddy loved each other and wanted to be a family together. But we're already a family, Ethan observed with his characteristic thoughtfulness. We are, Nora agreed. But now Daddy will live with us all the time, not just next door. In the middle house too? Alexander asked, referring to Penthouse B, where construction had begun to connect the two apartments. All of it will be our home, Gabriel explained. One big space for our family. The twins accepted this news with the adaptability of childhood, more excited about the prospect of having both parents under one roof than questioning the complexities of adult relationships. They married 3 months later in the sculpture garden of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where they had first met. The ceremony was intimate, with only close friends, family, and of course Ethan and Alexander serving as ring bearers. Nora wore a simple cream dress rather than traditional white, acknowledging that this was not a first beginning, but a new chapter in a story already rich with history. Their vows, written separately but echoing similar themes, spoke of lessons learned through separation, of appreciation deepened by absence, of love made stronger through forgiveness and growth. I promise to see you, Gabriel vowed, his voice steady as he held Nora's hands. Not just to look, but to truly see you. Your dreams, your needs, your strength. I promise to be present not just physically but completely, to value our family above all else, to remember every day that the greatest achievement of my life is standing right here in this circle of love we've created. Nora's vows spoke of trust rebuilt, of walls carefully lowered, of the courage to believe in second chances. "I promise to remember that we are both works in progress," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "That our imperfections and our growth are what make our love authentic. I promise to communicate even when it's difficult, to trust you with my heart again, to build our future together day by day, moment by moment." As they exchanged rings, Gabriel now wearing a band that matched Nora's intertwined metals, the twins watched with solemn joy, understanding in their childish way that something important was happening, that their family was being formally united in a way that matched the reality they had been living. The renovation of the 3 penthouses was completed shortly after the wedding, creating a unique home that reflected their journey. Penthouse A remained primarily Gabriel's domain, with his office and spaces that reflected his tastes. Penthouse C preserved much of Nora's aesthetic and the twins' familiar environment. And between them, Penthouse B had been transformed into shared family space. A large kitchen where they gathered for meals, a comfortable living area for movie nights and games, a library filled with books for all ages. The symbolic significance of this arrangement wasn't lost on either of them. Separate spaces honoring their individual identities, connected by the family heart they had created together. It was a physical manifestation of the balance they had found, of the understanding that healthy love required both togetherness and independence. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us it's never too late for love to find its way home. Remember that sometimes the most painful separations can lead to the most beautiful reunions, if we have the courage to forgive, to grow, and to believe in second chances.